Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ray, for being here. There's a lot of questions about early stage due diligence, about why the indictment and the timing of that indictment by justice. But I think as policymakers, we're here to understand the FTX collapse and what can be done to prevent a future fraud like this from ever occurring again where individuals lost their money. It's complicated by the fact that FTX is domiciled in a foreign jurisdiction, and by all indications, Mr. Bankman Fried is also in a foreign jurisdiction at this time. And so we should ask ourselves tough questions as to why a company like FTX would choose to set itself up in the Bahamas rather than the United States in the first place. I think that's a question for Congress. And also, we can't lose sight of the fact that millions of Americans lost money in this. I'm outraged. I think you're outraged. The American people should be outraged. Let me dive in. A day after FTX filed for bankruptcy, multiple outlets reported that there was a hack or potential theft. You have stated unauthorized access to certain assets occurred and that the company was in touch with law enforcement officials and regulators. Have you determined whether, in fact, assets were moved out after the bankruptcy?
Yes, clearly there was assets moved out after the bankruptcy.
And do you know whether or not that was an actual hack, or was this done, as has been reported, at the direction of the Bahamian authorities?
It was both.
It was both. And so some was done as a result of a hack, some was done as a result of the request of the Bahamian authorities.
Yes, that's right.
And do you have indication as to why the Bahamian authorities made that request?
Well, it wasn't a request. They just took it.
The Bahamian authorities took the funds that were at FTX
Yes.
through their own action. Was no action required by FTX employees? Maybe you could provide just a little color.
They were aided by the ex-employees, yes.
They were aided by former employees of FTX.
Yes, Mr. Wang and Mr. Fried.
Is it in the eyes of the Bahamian authorities did this to protect clients and creditors? Do you have insight into the motivation behind this action?
Unlike the Chapter 11 process, there's no transparency in the process in the Bahamians, and we've repeatedly asked them for clarity about what they've been doing, and we've been shut down on that.
So from you've requested insight as to why this was done from the Bahamian authorities, and the Bahamian authorities, their reply to you was that they did not reply, or they replied and it was unsatisfactory?
They put out statements that it was in the interest of Bahamian creditors, although our view is that it violated the automatic stay in bankruptcy.
And so you have questions that still remain unanswered by the Bahamian authorities that would shed additional light into your investigation if that information was provided?
Yes.
Do you believe that at that time Mr. Bankman Fried was attempting to undermine Chapter 11 cases by expanding the scope, by moving assets to accounts under the control of the Bahamian authorities?
It appears so.
So it appears that he may be working to undermine the scope of U.S. federal bankruptcy law.
That's what it appears, yes.
And so then do you still believe that the Chapter 15 case should be consolidated in the Delaware Bankruptcy Court?
No, I do not think so.
What do you think should be, what do you think would be the best course of action?
They have a liquidation proceeding relative to FTS Digital Markets. They filed that proceeding there. That is their proceeding. We think the Chapter 11 process is the only open, transparent process that gives visibility to customers of what happened and when they're going to get their money and how they're going to get their money. The process in the Bahamian Islands is not a transparent process. We have opened up the ability to share everything that we have with the Bahamian government, similar to how we share with other liquidators around the world. Not only in this case, in other cases, it's meant to be a very cooperative situation. The pushback that we've gotten is sort of extraordinary in the context of bankruptcy. It raises questions. It seems irregular to me. There's lots of questions on our part, and obviously we're investigating it.
I appreciate your candor on that point. I think that's a really important point that we look at. And again, one of my concerns is we look at overall crypto policy, shifting away from this specific bankruptcy, is that we have a large number of crypto companies that have chosen to domicile outside the United States rather than inside the United States, and a lack of a regulatory framework inside the United States, my concern is that's moving people to be offshore. And when they're offshore, when a fraud like this occurs, it's to the detriment of Americans who've placed their money in trust of a company like FTX. I appreciate you being here, cognizant of my time. I yield back.